Direct from our newsroom in New York, in color, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Eric Severide in Washington, Bob Simon in London, Jed Duval in Schoon, Cambodia, Ben Silver in New York, Richard C. Hottelet at the United Nations, and Dan Rather at the White House.
Good evening. The air piracy by Arab guerrillas continues. Today, Palestinian commandos took over a British airliner, the fourth successful hijacking in as many days. The jetliner, carrying 113 persons, was forced to land at the Jordanian desert airfield, already occupied by two other big planes, the TWA and a Swiss airliner. And the fate of the 190 persons aboard those planes is still uncertain. The Arabs have been demanding the release of 7 terrorists in exchange for the freedom of the hostages, but there have been conflicting reports throughout the day whether the commandos will go through with their original threat to blow up the planes and the passengers unless their demands are met. Meanwhile, the United States, other involved Western nations, and the UN Security Council have been holding urgent meetings on the crisis, and the Red Cross is busy trying to reach a settlement with the guerrillas. More on this Middle East situation in a moment.
For years, people have used cigarette holders like this one. But today, you can have a cigarette holder on the end of your cigarette. Parliament gives you one. Like yesterday's cigarette holder, Parliament's has a sturdy outer shell, tough enough to bite on. And like yesterday's cigarette holder, ours helps you get a good, fresh taste because the Parliament filter never touches your lips. It's recessed inside our holder. The cigarette holder of today. You'll find it on the end of every Parliament. On king size and new 100s. Parliament. It works like a cigarette holder works.
The Palestinian guerrillas added 113 more people to their bag of hostages today and increased their diplomatic pressure on Britain by hijacking that BOAC liner flying from Bombay, India to London. Once again, the Arabs brought a captive plane down in Beirut, Lebanon to refuel and pick up guerrilla reinforcements. This time it was a VC-10, which had just taken off from an intermediary stop at Bahrain on the Persian Gulf when it was seized in midair. The passengers included at least 3 Americans, a group of 21 school children, an infant, and a 16-year-old sheikh of Bahrain who was on the way to school in England. In Beirut, the British ambassador appealed to the hijackers to let the women and children off, but he was refused. Instead, 2 more guerrillas, a man and a woman, got on. And the plane left the airport once more to join the SwissAir and TWA liners and their unfortunate occupants at Dawson's field in the Jordanian desert. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine did not immediately threaten to blow up this British plane as it has done to the Swiss and American planes. Presumably, this technicality was of small comfort, though, to the newest group of hostages. In Washington, President Nixon held another emergency meeting on the hijackings, and we have a report from Dan Rather.
President Nixon tonight met for an hour and a half with Secretary of State William Rogers to discuss the Skyjack crisis. This followed an afternoon in which Mr. Nixon discussed all of his alternatives with his personal foreign policy advisor, Dr. Henry Kissinger. The alternatives include possible military action. The President has been in touch with Defense Secretary Melvin Laird about that. The White House refuses to discuss even the possibility of military involvement and is disappointed that information about even contingency military plans has leaked out. 6 C-130 prop jet transport planes have been moved into Incirlik, Turkey. The White House announced this, but emphasized that these transports are standing by only for possible evacuation of the hostages in Jordan, if that becomes possible. 2 airborne brigades of the U.S. Army's 8th Infantry Division stationed in Germany are reported to be on the alert. There is no confirmation. White House and State Department sources play down the possibility of military action. Defense Department sources indicate U.S. military involvement is unlikely unless there is, as they put it, some kind of disaster. Everyone at the White House, including the President, appears to feel there is still hope that disaster somehow can be avoided. Dan Rather, CBS News, the White House.
At the United Nations, the Security Council gathered on the hijackings at the urgent request of the United States and Britain. We have a report from Richard C. Hottelet.
The United States and Great Britain called for this urgent meeting to rush through a humanitarian appeal for immediate release of the passengers and crews. Now, 8 hours later, the Council has still not convened. It is bogged down in the bottomless politics of the Middle East. Some changes have been made in the wording of the appeal to make it easier for the Arabs and their friends to accept. It now calls for release of all persons held as a result of the hijackings, which would include hijackers as well as hostages. And instead of urging states to take measures to prevent further hijackings, the new formulation calls for legal steps to rule out military action. But the big complication is Algeria's determination to lay the Palestine Arabs' case before the Council. This would draw a reply from Israel and quite possibly bring all the broad and basic issues of the Middle East struggle into debate. The UN peace talks are shaky enough without that, but the hope is that if it must come, it come after the hijack appeal is adopted. Richard C. Hottle at CBS News, United Nations.
While world diplomats worry with the crisis of the hijacking, some 300 persons wait as hostages at that desert airfield in Jordan. Most of them have been held since Sunday's seizure of the SwissAir and Transworld Airlines planes. Arab guerrillas guard their captives with tanks and armor. International Red Cross representatives have visited the hostages and say their number includes many women, some of them pregnant, and children. The Arabs occasionally have permitted hostages to leave the planes where temperatures soar in the Mideast sun. The guerrillas also have allowed a doctor to visit. The deadline for destruction of the planes has been set for 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time tonight, but the State Department says there is unconfirmed information that this has been extended 6 hours to 4 a.m. Eastern Time. The Red Cross said the Arabs indicated that the captives would be removed beforehand, and at long-range reporters were able to talk with some of the hostages gathered under the plane's wings.
We're very crowded, and I think the women, and especially the children, are very restless.
Enough to eat, enough to drink?
There's much to eat and there's much to drink.
Are the women and the
We're
children?
very crowded.
How old is the youngest child you have on board?
We have 2 infants,
How old are they?
3 months.
What is their condition?
Their conditions are good.
We've been given food and water and whatever else was possible to be given that we requested, and we're all waiting anxiously for a settlement to be made and we should be able to go home.
What is your nationality?
Belgium. United States.
Well, as we reported, the Palestinians are demanding release of 7 terrorists held by Germany, Switzerland, and Britain. The Swiss and Germans have agreed to release the 6 they hold, and there are indications that the British would agree to release a 24-year-old Lila Khaled if it would speed agreement to free the hostages. Associated Press speculates that a police caravan in London tonight was transporting Miss Khaled to an airport for that release. The Israelis earlier had demanded her extradition on grounds that her futile hijack attempt on Sunday was made aboard an Israeli airliner. Miss Khaled is an important symbol to the terrorists. She was part of a successful hijack team which last year forced a TWA airliner to fly to Syria. After that episode, she was interviewed by Robert Key of the Thames television broadcast This Week.
By hijacking that plane, we can tell those people that there's a war, there's a cause here in the Middle East, so just not come here.
Now you are continuing to fight for that cause and fighting that war.
Yes.
How far ahead do you see the possibility of victory in your fight for Palestine?
As long as we have our clear vision of the revolution, I can say that we will have victory at the end.
In how many years do you think this end might be?
We can't say in how many years. It will take us a long, long time.
While world attention was focused on the guerrillas' hostages, security was tightened at air terminals everywhere, and Ben Silver reports on an example at New York's Kennedy Airport.
The beefed-up security was even apparent on this 747 flight to San Juan, an air route far removed from the recent rash of hijackings. The surveillance begins when the passengers arrive, and continues through the ticketing and check-in process. This is one of the obvious electronic devices used in the screening process. It's designed to detect ferrous metal, such as a gun or other type weapon. When this man's baggage activated something, he was frisked. After a thorough search, a monkey wrench was found and he was allowed to board the plane. Not only did Pan Am station security people throughout the airport, a United States Marshal in plain clothes was also there. All the hand luggage is searched. Even though the heightened security measures caused delays and inconvenience, none of the passengers seemed to object. How do you feel about having your baggage checked?
Fine. Feel fine. I think it's very necessary. I think we need these to keep these hijackers away.
You feel safe now?
I feel safe, yeah.
Sir, how do you feel about your luggage being searched?
I don't mind it one bit. I'm very glad to, after what's happened the last couple of days.
Security doesn't stop at the airport. A Pan Am official told me that security guards are being placed aboard some flights. He wouldn't say which ones or if the guards were armed. Ben Silver, CBS News at Kennedy Airport.
The airline industry appears to be seriously divided over what to do about hijackers. In New York this afternoon, reporters talked with Pan American Airways President Najib Halabi, whose line lost that 747 in Cairo 3 nights ago. He came out for armed guards on planes and against boycotts of countries that give hijackers sanctuary.
It's my understanding that the pilots are prepared to consider armed government guards, call them sky marshals if you will, on international flights. Certainly Pan American World Airways is prepared to carry those guards as a very stern measure of security, provided they are highly qualified, precisely trained, and you might say professionals who would not endanger the aircraft passengers more than the would-be skyjacker. The problem broke out in Amsterdam, in Frankfurt, in London, and in Zurich. And so I believe we have to consider this a worldwide threat and take measures all over the world. Now, the mere boycotting of flights through that area would not prevent or apparently even deter acts of piracy.
But in London, the International Federation of Airline Pilots Associations took just the opposite stand, against armed guards on planes and for boycotts of countries that receive hijackers. After the meeting, CBS newsman Bob Simon talked with the U.S. delegate, Pan Am Captain Ray Gerber.
We are taking actions which we consider to be pertinent at this time in this context. Our appeal at the present time is to the governments who are capable of solving the entire hijack problem and not the piecemeal parts. We are concerned with this, and we would, in everyday actions, try to come up with better ways of eliminating the hijacking on a day-to-day basis. But ultimately, the only real solution is if the hijackers have no sanctuary. The only reason the hijackings continue is because the hijacker knows that he has a place to direct that airplane to where he will not be extradited or prosecuted. As far as carrying armed guards on the airplane, if ALPA's policy at the present time is that we do not advocate it for many reasons. Individual pilots, I think, including myself, have more or less an open mind on it. We just don't know. It's a mixed blessing, no question about that. It can lead to disaster, and at the same time it can prevent hijackings. We simply can't tolerate the situation. You can't go on endlessly like this. We've been so fortunate in not having complete disasters, the one where the aircraft was blown up in the air, but there could have been any number of other ones. We just from a pilot's viewpoint, we just figure that sooner or later there's going to be, if this continues, there's going to be worse disasters.
CBS will present a special report on the hijack situation tonight at 11:30 Eastern Time over many of these stations. In Jordan, there was more fighting today between Palestinian guerrillas and Jordanian troops. King Hussein, who has been having trouble maintaining his throne, later handed over full military powers to a general known to be sympathetic to the Palestinians. Washington sources said today that the United States is going to sell Israel about 15 more Phantom jets. The Israelis have argued that they need them to help offset the Egyptian military buildup in the Suez Canal area.
Came on before, Richard. Emotions are what make a woman different than a man, and that's the reason for antiperspirant Secret.
He's right after Monroe.
It's made to help keep you dry with special ingredients.
Richard C. Morgan.
Oh, son, I'm so proud of you.
Secret, made for a woman's extra feelings.
Hurry, it's my wife.
Mr. Purdy, this big machine you sold us doesn't get clothes any cleaner than
Did you use Dash?
Well, I wanted to use it my old detergent first.
Mrs. Heath, big machines wash 50% more clothes. That means more dirt. Use Low Suds Dash. Dash is almost twice as concentrated. Well, let's try it.
Oh, that's more.
She'll be all right now. Dash gets the best from the big machine.
A defendant in the My Lai massacre case today accused General Westmoreland, the former Vietnam commander, now Army Chief of Staff, of dereliction and failure to control his troops. Sergeant Ezequiel Torres contended that Westmoreland himself must take the blame for whatever happened at My Lai. In Saigon, Vice President Key said that he still intends to visit the United States next month, despite what was described as pressure to call off the trip. And CBS News correspondent Mel McLaughlin says that pressure is being applied by the Nixon administration and Key's superior, President Thieu. Key is scheduled to appear at a Win the War rally in Washington on October 3rd. In the Indochina War, Cambodian troops operating under strategy devised by Premier Lon Nol thought they had trapped 600 communists some 26 miles below the capital of Phnom Penh. But the premier apparently overlooked a series of mountain passes in the area. All the enemy escaped. Elsewhere, the Cambodians launched what was described as their largest operation of the war. We have a report from Jed Duval.
This little army is growing and just beginning to test some of its new muscle. In the 6 months since the Lon Nol government took over in Phnom Penh, the army has tripled in number. Today, it begins its biggest operation to date. Several thousand troops pushing north along this highway where North Vietnamese regulars have been concentrated. As they approach what they think are enemy positions, the Cambodians fan out to form an attack line. Like all Cambodian operations, this one goes very slowly. First, the troops halt to wait for help from airplanes. The enemy may be in nearby houses, so the Cambodians ask for a bombardment. 2 American planes have been prowling overhead all morning. After the airstrike, a mortar shelling, preceded by much discussion about setting up the thing. Finally, it goes. Then, so do the troops. But they can go only one at a time because the communists have blown up almost all of a tiny bridge. Thus, the biggest and possibly most important Cambodian operation begins to last days, possibly weeks. A large knot of infantry, plodding and resting, gropes through the farmlands for the enemy, an enemy who is as elusive here as he has been in Vietnam for years. Jed Duval, CBS News, north of Schoon, Cambodia.
Substantial absenteeism marked the beginning of school today in 2 areas chosen by the Supreme Court for a ruling on integration by busing, Mobile, Alabama, and Charlotte, North Carolina. Exact attendance figures were not available, but it was apparent that many white parents kept their children home. Apparently yielding to congressional protest, the Nixon administration said today it will allocate the full $243 million appropriated for the college student loan program. This is $66 million more than the administration wanted, and only last week officials had said the extra money would be held back for review. A nationwide railroad strike scheduled for tonight has been postponed 5 days while negotiations continue in Washington. The Ford Motor Company says it does not plan to lock out its employees if the United Auto Workers strike General Motors or Chrysler next Tuesday. The union has exempted Ford as a strike target this year and will pick its target on Sunday. The averages were lower today on the New York Stock Exchange. Volume was 16.25 million shares. The average price per share fell 10 cents on the New York Exchange, but remained unchanged on the American Exchange.
I'm a waitress, chef, chauffeur, teacher, lover, nurse. I'm a housewife. And I love it. I love what I do because I take good care of myself. I exercise, get plenty of rest, try to watch my diet. And to make sure I get enough vitamins and iron, I start every morning with a Geritol tablet. Geritol is one of the nice things I do for myself. And with all my jobs, I need all the help I can get.
Geritol, one of the good things you can do for yourself. Here is a delicious new laxative drink. Just mix it up to fix you up every day so irregularity won't bother you. It's new, fruit-flavored Zeratan. What a delicious way to take a laxative when lack of bulk causes a problem. Fruit-flavored Zeratan powder just mixes with water to form the laxative bulk your system may be missing. Drink sunny fruit-flavored Zeratan every day. Mix it up to help fix you up for gentle daily regularity. It's delicious.
The Senate's Democratic leadership has begun a move for adjournment by mid-October, 2 to 3 weeks before the elections. The Democrats are proposing a time limit on debate on a long list of unfinished legislation. That includes 7 appropriations bills, electoral reform, pollution, family assistance, equal rights, Social Security, and the Farm Bill. According to General Motors President Edward Cole, the latest charges by Ralph Nader about GM's defunct Corvair are both false and vitriolic. Cole sent a detailed reply to Transportation Secretary Volpe after Nader complained that top GM officials deliberately sat on reports that the Corvair tended to overturn easily. According to Cole, Nader was referring to GM proving ground tests in which drivers overturned Corvairs deliberately. A member of the President's Commission on Pornography today won a court order temporarily blocking publication of the Commission's report. Charles Keating, Jr., President Nixon's only appointee on the 18-member body, said that he and 6 others dissent from its findings and need more time to prepare a minority report. The majority report reportedly will recommend an easing of anti-obscenity laws. The passenger liner Queen Elizabeth may now have a prouder fate than as a floating tourist barge. Instead, she may return to sea. In Fort Lauderdale, Florida, the ship's owners went bankrupt while preparing her for tourists. Now receivers are auctioning her off. The provisionally accepted high bid of more than $3 million is by a firm from Taiwan, which wants to return the ship to the passenger trade. Detroit Tiger pitching star Denny McLain has been suspended again, this time for the rest of the current season. Baseball Commissioner Bowie Kuhn said he was acting on new allegations involving McLain's conduct toward Tiger management and his carrying a gun. Dissident literary sources in Moscow say a key figure in their movement, novelist Yuli Daniel, will be set free this Sunday after serving his full 5-year prison term for writing anti-communist literature and smuggling it abroad. However, Daniel reportedly won't be permitted to return to Moscow and will be banished to a distant town.
This is Big Al Hurt saying that you need only 2 things when you go fishing. Lots of Miller High Life and a little bit of luck. Hey, look at that, man. Big Daddy. That deserves a Miller. Hearty, robust, deep down good. Miller High Life, the champagne of beers.
Benson and Hedges 100s must taste pretty good. Look what people put up with to smoke them.
1690, the English philosopher John Locke wrote, "Whenever law ends, tyranny begins." Some thoughts along that line tonight from Eric Severin.
One young American passenger from the plane destroyed by Arab commandos in Cairo arrived home yesterday and he remarked, "At one time I might have said that there was some good in political acts of terror like this one. But I was there and I saw a lot of innocent lives at stake. I guess this was an important experience for me." The young man was lucky not only to escape with his life, but to have made the transition from political fantasy to reality, from a theory to its practice in one short jump. Fanatics, including terrorists, always pour holy water on their acts, however terrible. It is an old story, a constantly repeated example of the human capacity for self-exculpation, that is, self-deception. Terror is purifying, said the leaders of the French Revolution as they beheaded, burned, and drowned their victims, the certain road to virtue. Every political villain in history first persuaded himself that the end justifies the means. Nothing but ends justify means, but they do not justify any means. Where the line is drawn among means is the determinant between civilized life and savagery. For 1,000 years, the central argument on how men shall live has been the argument over means. It is what due process of law is all about. So-called legal technicalities are expressions of human principles. Inadmissible means devour principle and corrupt their users, often forever. Power gained by terror is generally sustained only by more terror. And only in degree are the Arab guerrillas or the Viet Cong terrorists different from middle-class Western student militants who smash up a campus building. We alone are right, they are saying. We, anointed few, possess the final truth. Therefore, those who resist are the real enemies of the good life, and their removal or silencing will, by some mysterious law of nature, automatically bring the good and the true into being. Western student or Arab commando both possess the totalitarian state of mind. But violence in the political realm is like pregnancy. It cannot be stopped at any predetermined point, however well-reasoned the advanced calculations.
The UN Security Council, after much maneuvering, finally met tonight and quickly decided upon a simple appeal to the Arab guerrillas to release the crews and passengers of the 3 hijacked planes. And that's the way it is, Wednesday, September 9th, 1970. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
These giant fans can whip up gale force winds. Winds that could mean trouble for a little car on an expressway. But this little car is Ford's new Pinto, with a wider stance than any little import, for better stability. With Pinto's wider stance, you have a tight road grip and less chance of being pushed into trouble. Pinto comes through. It's the little car with the wider stance. For better stability. A tight road grip, less chance of trouble. Who said America couldn't achieve a stable economy? Pinto, a little better idea from Ford.
Coming September 11th.
Direct from our newsroom in New York, in color, this has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. Tomorrow night, the vacation season will be climaxed by a full-hour trip around America. Don't miss this fascinating special with Glenn Ford and a host of top stars at 8, 7 Central Time on CBS.